What if one man could turn thousands of children into killers and vanish for decades without a trace? Joseph Kony, the elusive warlord behind the Lord's resistance army, is not just a fugitive, he's a ghost in the modern world. For over 30 years, his name has haunted Central Africa, tied to unspeakable war crimes, abductions, and brutal warfare. This isn't just a story about a criminal. It's about how the world failed to catch Africa's most wanted man. Stay until the end, because the final twist might explain why Joseph Kony is still free. His legend lives not only in the past, but in the silence of those too afraid to speak. And that silence, more than anything, tells us he's not done yet. The rise of a demon in Uganda. He claimed to speak with spirits, but left villages burning. Joseph Kony emerged in the late 1980s, not as a general, but as a prophet claiming divine mission. He vowed to cleanse Uganda with fire, forming the Lord's resistance army under spiritual pretense. He promised salvation, but delivered terror, raiding communities and forcing loyalty through blood. With each village he torched, his myth grew stronger. His name feared more than any army. Kony's first recruits were told they'd become immortal soldiers. Many never lived to question it. Children were taken in the dead of night, families slaughtered to eliminate resistance. He convinced followers that betrayal would bring eternal damnation. Child soldiers, the army of shadows. Imagine being 9 years old with a gun in your hands and your family behind you, dead. The LRA's main force was made up of children, abducted and broken into killers. They weren't just trained, they were psychologically shattered and rebuilt as weapons. New recruits were often forced to kill someone they loved to sever any chance of escape. This systematic cruelty created an army that obeyed without hesitation or hope. Many of Kony's child soldiers were forced to kill their own siblings to prove loyalty. They were given new names, forbidden to speak their old ones again. Fear and isolation turned them into tools of war. The spiritual manipulation. He didn't need an army, he needed belief. And belief, twisted, was his deadliest weapon. Kony blended Christianity with mysticism. Claiming spirits gave him divine instruction. He performed rituals that blessed bullets, made skin bulletproof, and protected fighters with curses. Those who doubted were punished by both man and spirit, according to Kony's law. His voice became gospel, and his followers lived in constant spiritual dread. Some fighters still believe they were cursed the day they left the LRA. Kony's commandments were enforced with mutilation or execution. To disobey him was to risk supernatural vengeance. The world's attention, too little, too late. By the time the world noticed Kony, thousands were already missing. Ugandan voices cried for help for years before international media paid attention. It wasn't until the early 2000s that NGOs began documenting the horror. Even then, most governments offered words, not action, and Kony's empire expanded. The viral Kony 2012 campaign gave hope, but ultimately faded like a passing storm. Despite massive attention, Kony's name disappeared from headlines within 6 months. The international community moved on, while the LRA continued its terror in silence. Hope was drowned by bureaucracy and distraction. Crossing borders, escaping justice. He didn't need a country, he made the jungle his nation. When Uganda grew too dangerous, Kony vanished into neighboring territories. He moved like a phantom through South Sudan, Congo, and the Central African Republic. Each border he crossed became a shield, protected by weak governments and geography. And with every move, his trail went colder, his capture more unlikely. In 2013, US drones locked onto his camp, but were ordered to hold fire. The forest became his fortress, his camouflage perfected through decades. Each failed attempt only strengthened his legend. Kony's network, funding the war. No war lasts this long without money, and Kony found his sources in blood. The LRA looted villages, hijacked aid convoys, and even smuggled ivory. Rumors swirled that Sudan's regime once backed Kony to destabilize Uganda. Weapons flowed through the black market, traded for stolen food and minerals. Even with a shrinking army, his influence was purchased in bullets and gold. UN reports revealed Kony's men may have traded diamonds with rebel groups as recently as 2020. His war wasn't about land, it was about control through chaos. He turned instability into profit. Trusted couriers moved money and messages across borders, keeping his operation alive. Some of his support came from corrupt local officials who saw profit in prolonging the conflict. A failed manhunt, US Special Forces involved. America sent elite troops into the jungle and still came up empty. In 2011, the US deployed special operations teams to assist local forces. They used drones, helicopters, and surveillance tech but never got close. Kony used runners, bush paths, and spiritual fear to stay ahead. Even with US muscle behind the mission, he proved impossible to pin down. In one mission, soldiers found a camp abandoned just 24 hours earlier. Kony had vanished again. He left behind fires still burning, food still warm. He had become a master of evasion, the ghost of Central Africa. How do you capture a man who doesn't exist on paper? Joseph Kony has no online presence, no bank accounts, no traceable assets. His face hasn't been photographed in over a decade. No one knows what he looks like now. Villagers report sightings, but fear retaliation from loyalists. He lives off the grid, in the most literal way possible. Intelligence sources believe he uses body doubles to confuse observers. Even defectors aren't sure if they've seen the real Kony. The myth has overtaken the man. Satellite surveillance has failed to locate him despite millions in resources. In Central Africa, his name is a whisper spoken only when the night is silent and the forest still. The children who escaped, some ran from him. Others returned to confront the monster in their memories. Thousands of former child soldiers have slowly rejoined society, scarred, but surviving. Rehabilitation centers attempt to heal what was shattered, but trauma runs deep. Nightmares, guilt, and societal rejection still plague these survivors. Their stories offer insight into one of the darkest chapters of African history. One former soldier now works with international forces to find Kony, tracking the man who stole his childhood. His life is a mission to deliver justice to the ghost who still haunts him. The past refuses to let go. Why Joseph Kony still matters. He's not just a fugitive, he's a symbol of global failure. Kony may no longer command large armies, but his blueprint lives on. Groups like Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab use similar tactics: child abduction, spiritual control, cross-border terror. He pioneered a model of invisible warfare that still spreads violence. His name is a warning: evil doesn't disappear, it adapts. In early 2024, reports suggested Kony may be regrouping, reaching out to old commanders for a final resurgence. The jungle may no longer hide him forever, but it's still keeping him alive. Justice remains unfinished. Joseph Kony isn't just a man in hiding. He's the shadow of everything we failed to stop. His crimes spanned generations, and his ghost still walks free because the world let it. He turned children into killers and war into a religion, and still, no one has brought him to justice. His story is not just a chapter in Africa's past, it's a mirror of global indifference. If this story unsettled you, like, subscribe, and stay with us as we expose the darkest truths hiding in plain sight. Because only when the world listens can monsters like Kony finally fall. And until that day comes, his silence remains a scream that no one dares answer.